Okay, hello. Welcome back to Below Decks. I'm going to get out of the way the fact that I am not very well disposed to recording a video that's about music because I literally can't hear right now. Uh, I have a medically identified wax build-up. It will be treated soon enough. It was meant to have been treated multiple times now, but you don't want to hear about that. The point is, I can barely hear. I can barely hear. But we have a new Below Decks, and it's about Vocal soundtrack, so good for me. And this is, as we'll get into, in place of a development diary for this month. I think that makes sense. The explanation is, of course, there was the On the Horizon broadcast, essentially a dev diary. In fact, it's more in depth than the usual dev diary, so I think taking the time to delve into a more particular aspect of road core than just the current state of things makes a bit more sense as sort of the monthly entry into things. So let's just get started. As usual, I do pretty much read these verbatim, as has been permitted by Aaron and GoShip in general, but I will still give insights along the way where I feel like it's appropriate, or just general thoughts. Anyway, so let's get into it. Below Decks at GoShip, the making of road core soundtrack. Why is that a link? What is that a link to? The post. Great. Good. Oh, look at that. Anyway. Hello, Reclaimers. Oh, or how do you make something sound familiar and original at the same time? Well, you would really just apply the same principles you do to making every individual song, I would say. Deep Rock already has a veritable variety of genres underneath the sort of broad cyberpunk synthwave approach. You have things like Run, which is a very sort of like spastic, I guess, drum and bass rock infused song that's not exactly like cyberpunk. So there are definitely differences already in Deep Rock's own soundtrack. Anyway, hello Reclaimers. Since we covered a lot of Road Core's recent development during this month's On the Horizon livestream, I'm doing a good old Below Decks piece instead of the usual development diary. There you go. This piece originated from an in-person talk by the sound design team about the Road Core soundtrack development process. Hope you like it, and I'm sure we will. I haven't read this beforehand. I do know this, obviously, there is a clip that we're going to watch or listen to later on. Apart from that, I haven't read any of this, so it should be fun. Shaping the soundtrack. Heavy bass is rattling the windows at Ghost Ship Games. Short intervals of shrill music interrupt the usual office murmurs, and stop as abruptly as they come. It's blaring, intense music, but muffled, like a nightclub swaddled in a big towel. The disturbance is coming from the sound studio, tucked away in a corner on the fourth floor. The studio's glass walls seem to blur as they vibrate with each subwoofer blast. Sneering synth notes float out overhead. Every once in a while, there's a short wail from an anguished saxophone. If you peek through a slit in the orange curtains drawn across the glass, you'll see three people packed in the warm little room. They're surrounded by AV cables and spindly microphone stands, all nodding their heads and staring intently at the same computer. On the screen, Road Core soundtrack is shape. This three-man team has been working on the Road Core soundtrack for the better part of 2 years. Musician Sophus, Alf, and sound designer Joachim Nyholm, who is also the voice of the male dwarves, by the way, are co-producers, both helping write, mix, and master the music. Mikkel Martin Peterson, game director Ghost Ship Games, consults to help direct the tone of each track, making sure this project delivers the emotions we're aiming for. Precisely which emotions those are, however, are up for debate, but the biggest challenge, now and since the start, is finding a way for this new soundtrack to be both familiar and original at the same time. And there will be sort of screenshots sprinkled throughout, not to extract too much from these, but I think they do continue to sell sort of the sort of rich manufactured environments of road core that we're going to be seeing. So we'll just take a little peek at those along the way, but we won't spend too much time on them. Make it new, but not too new. A new soundtrack starts with an empty screen. The audio mixing program Studio One awaits, its vacant workstation, daunting like a blank page in a Word document, mocking you for not having any good ideas, yet don't I know it. Where to start? When he began working on the new soundtrack in early 2024, Sophus Alf went for the familiar foothold of Deep Rock Galactic. It had been a while since I'd been working on video game music, so I started by trying to make DRG music again, just to see if I still got it. He laughs. Of course, these tests just sounded too much like DRG, so the team's first focus was to decide on some creative direction that would make Road Core's branch into something new. Road Core's soundtrack branch into something new, but not too new. Following up on Deep Rock Galactic was sort of intimidating, Sophus says. I dealt with a lot of imposter syndrome at the start, like, can we trust what we did last time? Did we just get lucky? Who says we can do it again? This new soundtrack aims to draw on the same notes that worked for Deep Rock Galactic, but drawing too closely would seem derivative. just more of the same. So how do you replicate the ingredients of a past success without just rehashing it? Can something be both familiar and original? When does new become too new? These questions have touched just about every aspect of Rollcore's development, faced the soundtrack team with particular intensity. For Sophus, this made it difficult to set out in a new direction. Getting through the first draft was tough. Like, when am I going to turn this around and start making good shit? He says. But we got there. You pretty much always do. It's about trusting your instincts and giving yourself space to experiment and try stuff that doesn't work, and not to overthink the whole thing. And there's the elevator. Actually, we'll be talking about the elevator later because there is sort of a breakdown of how music is implemented in Rollcore's gameplay, which is pretty cool, and it sort of sets it alongside Deep Rock's own. Anyway, composing the right feeling. The soundtrack's core goal is to provide an emotional backdrop for the rest of the game. After those early experiments, the team decided that leaning into a cosmic horror theme would be a good way to steer Rollcore into original territory. They dialed down the jaunty atmosphere of Deep Rock Galactic and started listening to more horror movie soundtracks and dark synth music to set the tone. A lot of inspiration stems from game director Mikkel's favourite bands and movies. He'll point to groups like Massive Attack and Depeche Mode, or the intense synthy soundtracks from Blade, It Follows, and Escape from New York, which sounds great stuff. These picks probably help give the game a bit of time capsule feeling, parallel to the clunky analog sci-fi tech in Deep Rock Galactic. Comparing Rollcore's spirit to DRG, sound designer Joachim Nyholm says, if DRG is 80s dwarves, Rollcore is 90s dwarves. Another key theme for Rollcore is a military feel, reflecting the Reclaimer's elite background and mercenary culture. To deliver on this, Mikkel really wanted a lot of military marching drums in the soundtrack, the type you're used to hearing at the start of a war movie. I think of Predator when he says stuff like that, which is great. Love Predator. Given that the first film took a lot of inspiration from Alien, first game took a lot of inspiration from Alien, I would love to see more inspiration from Predator. I think that'd be a cool sort of dichotomy. Because, well, first of all, I think Predator's better than. I shouldn't really get into that. There was a point where Mikkel was reviewing what I'd done and said I didn't have enough of the marching drums, so I went back and checked the tracks, and 70% of them had it. Sophus laughs. Finding the right sound took months of experimenting, discussing, and revising. It was a better part of a year before the whole team felt they'd landed on the Rollcore sound. From there, it was a matter of turning that sound into the right tracks. And this screenshot is just a very basic screenshot. This does showcase one of the newer weapons, which is a sort of very high fire rate, single-handed, like Uzi SMG weapon. Pretty sure it looks like it has a magazine size of 210. There you go. A good song isn't a good track. Making a good soundtrack isn't the same thing as making a good song, or a good album, I think might be a better word there. Often enough, a good song makes for a bad track. When you're playing a game, the action should be front and center. You're focused on whatever you're aiming at, tuned into your surroundings, listening to sound cues from telegraphed attacks or approaching enemies. A soundtrack shouldn't get in the way of that. A good soundtrack needs to make the game shine. It's more of an effect on the atmosphere. Something in the background, Sophus says. A song is different. It has to stand on its own, so it plays with your attention and emotions in a way. It's just got a different goal. But when you're working on a soundtrack, the number one thing to remember is your goal is to serve someone who's there to play the game. Who's there to play a game, not to listen to music. I think he's actually meant to say, Aaron. I think. A musician by trade, Sophus found it tough not to kick into songwriter mode while working on the soundtrack. By the end, he kept a running loop of Rollcore gameplay on a second monitor just to help keep his compositions on track. That sounds like a really sort of maddening but also smart way to go about that. Just have footage of the game on loop off to the side. At the start, I'd cook up a new track and be like, you guys, I made a banger, listen to this. And Mikkel and Joachim would listen and say, yeah, it's a good song, but is it serving the game? I'd have to go back and fix it, Sophus says. If a track becomes too song-like, it's not necessarily a loss. When he was working on Deep Rock Galactic soundtrack, Sophus recalls a synth riff getting cut from the project for being a bit too attention-grabbing. He still liked it though, and was able to pick it up and rework it into the main guitar part for a song with his own band, which he gets to here. Okay, so let's have a look at this. I actually didn't notice this when I first skimmed the post.
You were said.
But at the same time, obviously, it could be. I'm not going to play a full song, obviously. So, and given I can barely hear it, we'll see if this translates into anything valuable. Get through an ad. I shouldn't even be putting that on screen, should I? That's ridiculous. I'm so sorry. Anyway, let's have a listen to this. So. Okay, who knows what track that was supposed to be from? Oh well. I will link that in the description though, so you can go and take a look and maybe look at some of Sophus' other music. Sounds pretty cool from the scraps that sort of got through the oil and wax in my ears. Anyway, so this is a diagram for the team's own presentation on the soundtrack's development. I don't know if the text below really gets into this specifically, so let's take I think it does actually. Let's take a quick look still, see if I can sort of break this down. So we have Deep Rock Galactic at the start. You have mission time, about 15 to 30 minutes. You've got, and it alternates between level music, wave music, level music, wave music, level music, and end wave music. I think it's meant to actually be extraction. Obviously, wave music, about 2 minutes, end wave music, about 5 minutes. That is about the difference between extraction and swarm tracks. Road Core is much more compact, but also with a total time of 50 to 60 minutes, but with a level time of 10 to 15 minutes. You have level music, you have wave music, which is 1 minute, then level music, wave music, level music, and then elevated music, which is also only 1 minute. And then right down the final level with boss music with a more indeterminate time. So that gives you an idea, but I think the writing below does go into this quite deeply, so let's get into it. 4 moods, 4 types of tracks. Road Core's soundtrack falls into 4 different categories. Each serves a different purpose, coming into play at different times during the run. Every run in Road Core consists of several different cave systems, each with their own elevator extraction sequence, periodic waves of enemies throughout, and a big boss fight at the very end. These 4 different categories are distinct gameplay experiences, so each one calls for its own type of backing track. Here's how the team makes music to match each sequence. Level music. This is the baseline backdrop of the caves, the atmospheric background stuff that plays while exploring each mining facility. It's not meant for the red alert moment, but should still suggest some sense of danger around the corner. Track length 4 to 6 minutes, low intensity, slow tempo, themes of military music, military movies, heroic feel, slightly sinister tension. That's basically the ambient music in this case. Wave music. This gets queued up during a core spawn attack, immediately switching the mood to a high intensity fight sequence because an average swarm in Road Core only lasts about a minute. These tracks have to hit hard and fast, getting right into the action. Track length around 2 minutes, high intensity, fast tempo, pulsing beat, hard hitting from the start, no gradual build-ups. That is accurate. I've listened to some of it. That is correct. Elevator music. Not elevator music in the traditional sense, though early builds of the game did feature the girl from iPanama playing in the elevator. This category is the tracks that play when you've called the elevator at the end of a level and need to stand your ground while you wait for extraction. Extraction in Road Core is more of a stand your ground type of thing. You've already found the thing that's going to take you to the next stage. You basically have to wait for it to arrive, essentially. You find the elevator shaft, wait for the elevator to arrive. Track length around 2 to 3 minutes, medium to high intensity, ticking clock theme and beats plus rhythms, length of a heroic standoff. Boss music. These tracks only play once per run at the end of the final level when you've got a big classic boss fight showdown. Boss fights tend to last longer than the average swarm, so this is more of an endurance fight rather than a drag raced fast action sequence. Track length of 4 to 6 minutes, medium intensity, heavy sound, war drums, sense of brooding evil, epic cinematic scale. You can listen to a sample of these different categories below. No, okay, that's just about the ability. So this is what this is. So here we go. So we got level music. I think we will play this before, because it's obviously chopped up anyway. And I'll probably talk about this. So this is level music. This is meant to be an ambient track. It's definitely a lot more intense than the general. The elevator music. I find this one very reminiscent of Follow Molly, just a lot more sinister. Here's some boss music, which I think the boss music is the stuff that we've held by so far. I do like that bit at the end, though. And wave music. So, something I've already noticed, I find, especially for the wave music, is it's much more straightforward EDM than Deep Rock soundtrack, and I think that fits it actually very well. So I like pretty much all of that. Once again, I will say I do find the boss music the least compelling, but that's actually not particularly different to Deep Rock itself, so can't say that's like a worrying thing. And it is meant to have a different vibe, and I think the vibes are very strong. I just find it less musically compelling. And obviously, it's not inherently meant to be. They've really kind of been through the fact that it's really not meant to be musically compelling anyway. It's just meant to be emotionally invocational. Anyway, the final cut, the Rokor soundtrack, is very nearly finished. It's now made up of 24 tracks with a total runtime of 1 hour and 16 minutes. Along the way, lots of demos, rough drafts, and experiments got left on the cutting room floor. Sophus estimates about 15 more tracks ended up not making the final cut. Oh, guys. I mean, put them out. You don't even have to put them in the game, but putting them out would be a cool idea. Or even just like, I know that developers are very precocious. They're very precious about their work and what gets in and what doesn't, and exercising restraint. I want to see certain walls broken down, sort of in development in general, of sort of restraint, where it's like, have your more refined, like filed down version, but why don't you just throw in the option, like make a mix of the soundtrack that includes these tracks, and just have it as an option, like a setting. I think a lot of players would be fine with that. Just but these are rough cut tracks that got left on the cutting room floor, but you can include them in your soundtrack if you like. I really think I want to break those kind of walls down, and I don't mean with Ghost Ship specifically. I think in general, I really want to see stuff like that happen in video games. I think sometimes the developers are a little bit too precious about what they've made and it being their vision specifically. Let there be a little bit of the player's own idea of what the game could be bleed in by doing something like that. I think would be really cool. Anyway, there's still some mixing and mastering to do, like working with fine grit sandpaper to smooth out the last little details. Then it's time to plug it into the game and ship it. For Sophus, being done with the project is bittersweet. There's relief at the finish line, but it's a bit empty now that the race is over. Mostly though, he's looking forward to getting out into the world. I think we did a good job separating this one from the original Deep Rock Galactic soundtrack. It's more mature in a way. We worked on this one for longer, and everyone who worked on it is a little older and more experienced. It's a bit darker and more serious, sort of a more mature, aged product. By the end of the process, I hit on some stuff I'm really proud of. Now I'm just excited for people to hear it. Note, on the complete Rokor soundtrack, we intend to release the finished soundtrack along with Rokor's early access launch. It'll be available for purchase on Steam too. Stay tuned for more updates, and thanks for reading. And thank you, Aaron, for writing. I thought that was a really wonderful article. To be honest, it really gives you a good idea of what they're going for with Rokor's soundtrack, and I think gives me a lot of hope. I think it'd be awesome, obviously, to see more, like a volume 2, but I think this is a more broad and varied soundtrack out the gate already, so it doesn't feel as necessary. Obviously, we'll see how that feels when the game's actually out, but until then, this was a Below Decks video. But that's also kind of this month's development diary for Rokor. So, if you enjoyed, then please make sure to like and subscribe. Pardon me. And if you want to see more stuff like this, then please make sure to I got it a bit wrong. If you want to see more stuff like this, and you want to also stay on top of everything to do Deep Rock and Rokor, then also make sure to click the bell. And I'll see you next time.